What if the voice that could heal hearts came from a boy who had nothing, no home, no stage, no microphone, just a dream whispered into the wind of Manila's crowded streets? In the middle of noise, hunger, and survival, a young boy named Arvin Cruz, barely 16, sang not for fame, but for a few coins and the hope that someone, someday, might hear him. His cracked guitar, missing 2 strings, was his only companion. Yet when he sang, even the chaos of the city seemed to pause. Arvin lived with his widowed mother, Maria, a laundry worker who spent her nights washing clothes under dim light. Her hands were tired, her eyes sunken, but her heart glowed with faith. She often said Arvin's voice was a gift from heaven, one that could change their fate if only the world would listen. Then there was Rico, Arvin's best friend, a street kid with endless laughter despite his empty pockets. He believed in Arvin more than Arvin believed in himself. Every day, he would stand beside him, holding a plastic cup, collecting coins as Arvin sang to strangers rushing past. But dreams are fragile when life is cruel. Poverty had taught Arvin to hide his hopes behind humility. Still, deep inside, he carried a secret wish, to sing on a real stage, before real lights, where his mother could watch from the front row. One evening, fate wrote a twist no one could predict. A tourist, filming street scenes, captured Arvin's soulful version of Hotel California. The voice that once echoed through alleys now echoed across millions of screens online. The next morning, his world changed forever. Would a boy from the streets truly stand before the world's harshest judges? And if he did, could his voice move even the coldest heart, Simon Cowell's? Arvin Cruz was the kind of boy people often overlooked, quiet, polite, and small for his age. Yet behind those soft brown eyes lived a universe of dreams. At 16, he had already faced more than most grown men ever would. His world revolved around 2 things, his mother's tired smile and his music. Every dawn, while the city still slept, Arvin would walk barefoot to the market with a small cloth bag, collecting leftover fruits that vendors threw away. It wasn't for himself, it was for his mother, Maria, who worked through the night washing clothes in other people's homes. Her fragile hands were always bruised, her back bent from years of labor. Arvin hated seeing her that way, but she always told him, "Don't worry about me, hijo, just sing." Music was his escape. Under the cracked bridge near Quiapo, Arvin would sit on an old milk crate and strum his weathered guitar. It had belonged to his late father, who used to sing in church before illness took him away. Though 2 strings were missing, Arvin made it sing like a full orchestra. His voice, deep yet tender, carried a pain that could silence even the noisiest street. He wasn't confident, though. Each time people stared or laughed, he looked down, hiding behind his hair. Still, his love for singing was stronger than his fear. He sang when it rained, when he was hungry, when life seemed too heavy to bear. It was the only thing that made him feel alive. In the evenings, he would climb the rooftop of their small shanty and watch the city lights flicker in the distance. From there, he could see airplanes flying overhead, symbols of places he might never reach. He would hum softly, imagining himself on a big stage, with bright lights instead of street lamps, and applause instead of passing footsteps. But dreams, he often reminded himself, were not meant for boys like him. Still, something inside refused to give up, a faint spark of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, his voice could be his way out of the shadows. For Arvin, life had always been a quiet battle between hope and hunger. But one evening, that fragile balance shattered. Maria's health began to decline. The long nights of washing clothes, the constant exhaustion, and the lack of proper food finally took their toll. She would cough endlessly, yet refused to rest. Arvin noticed her trembling hands and pale lips, but she always smiled, pretending everything was fine. Deep inside, he knew, she was fading. He tried to sing more, staying longer on the streets, hoping to earn enough for medicine. But sometimes, hours would pass without a single coin. The sound of people laughing in restaurants nearby cut through him like glass. He was just a background sound in a world too busy to care. One rainy night, as water dripped through the holes in their tin roof, Arvin sat beside his sleeping mother, strumming his guitar softly. His voice cracked as he sang Hotel California, his father's favorite song. Each note carried a piece of his heart, fear, love, helplessness. He wished someone could hear him, not for fame, but because he didn't want to feel invisible anymore. The next morning, Maria collapsed. Arvin rushed her to a local clinic, but the doctor's words crushed him. They needed money for proper treatment. He had none. That day, for the first time, he didn't sing. He just sat in silence, clutching his guitar, feeling the weight of failure. Rico found him later, soaked and trembling by the bridge. He tried to cheer him up, but Arvin's eyes were distant. "What's the point of a dream?" he whispered to himself, "if the one person I'm dreaming for might not live to see it?" That night, the city lights looked dimmer, the music in his heart quieter. The boy who once sang to survive was now lost in a storm of fear and guilt. The stage he had once imagined felt like a fading mirage, something too far, too impossible. Little did he know, life was about to twist his sorrow into something extraordinary. Days passed like shadows. Arvin's songs had grown silent, replaced by the sound of worry and hospital bills. He spent his mornings sitting by his mother's bedside, watching her fight for breath, and his nights walking the empty streets with his guitar hanging loosely from his shoulder. His hope was slipping away, until fate decided to listen. One afternoon, as Arvin played under the same bridge he had always called his stage, a foreign tourist stopped nearby. The man, a travel vlogger, was filming the street life of Manila. He paused when he heard that haunting voice rise above the noise of traffic and rain. Arvin was singing Hotel California again, his voice trembling but powerful, soaked with emotion. The man stood still, recording every second. He didn't interrupt. He simply watched, amazed at how this barefoot boy could make an old song feel brand new. When Arvin finished, he smiled shyly and walked away, unaware that his life had just been captured, forever. Within days, the video was uploaded online with the caption, "Poor street boy sings Hotel California, better than the original." No one expected what happened next. The video spread like wildfire. Millions watched it, mesmerized by the raw pain in Arvin's voice. Comments flooded in, people from around the world wanted to know who he was, where he came from, how they could help. Reporters began searching for the mysterious boy from the streets of Manila. One morning, Rico came running to Arvin's home, shouting his name. He showed him the video on a borrowed phone. It had millions of views. Arvin stared in disbelief, his heart pounding. For the first time in his life, the world had listened. A week later, an email arrived, an invitation from a famous international talent show. They wanted him to audition live in front of the judges. Arvin's hands shook as he read the message. He looked at his mother, still weak but smiling faintly. Tears filled his eyes. It was the moment he had dreamt of his entire life, but he had never imagined it would come like this, born from pain, carried by hope. The invitation felt like a miracle, but miracles come with their own storms. Arvin had never been on a plane, never left his city. The thought of standing before world-famous judges filled him with fear more than excitement. How could a boy who sang under bridges belong on a stage watched by millions? The talent show organizers helped with the arrangements, but when the day came to leave, Arvin's heart broke. Maria was too weak to travel. She held his hand tightly at the hospital, whispering, through faint breaths, that she believed in him. He promised her he'd sing not for fame, but for her, for every mother who had sacrificed everything in silence. The flight to Los Angeles was a blur of emotions, awe, anxiety, disbelief. When Arvin arrived, everything felt too bright, too loud. The glittering stage lights were nothing like the flicker of Manila's street lamps. He practiced alone in his dressing room, clutching his worn-out guitar. He could still smell the rain on its wood, still see the scratches from years of street performances. It reminded him who he was and why he came. But backstage, as other contestants rehearsed with confidence, Arvin felt his old insecurities return. He wasn't trained. He didn't have fancy clothes or perfect English. All he had was his voice, the same voice that had carried him through hunger, loss, and fear. The night before his audition, he couldn't sleep. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, seeing not a poor boy, but someone who had survived. Every scar, every tear, every sleepless night had shaped his soul into a song. When morning came, he took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "You've sung through pain, now sing for love." Something inside him shifted that day. The timid street boy became a young man with purpose. He no longer feared the stage, he was ready to face it. Not to prove himself to the world, but to thank the world for finally listening. He stepped into the spotlight, and for the first time, he didn't feel small. He felt infinite. The stage lights dimmed, and silence filled the vast auditorium. Arvin stood at the center, barefoot, holding his father's old guitar. Before him sat the world, bright cameras, gleaming judges' tables, and a crowd that seemed to breathe in unison. Among them was Simon Cowell, his expression unreadable. Arvin closed his eyes and remembered the streets, the rain, his mother's fragile smile. Then, with trembling fingers, he strummed the first note of Hotel California. The sound that followed was not just music, it was memory, pain, and love woven together. His voice, raw and trembling, carried across the hall like a prayer. Each lyric told his story, of nights spent hungry, of dreams buried under noise, of a boy who refused to give up. The audience grew still. Even the judges leaned forward, their eyes softening. Arvin sang with everything he had, his soul spilling through every note. In his mind, he wasn't in Los Angeles, he was back home under the Manila Bridge, singing for the woman who had believed in him when no one else did. When he reached the final line, his voice cracked. He looked up toward the ceiling lights, tears shining in his eyes, whispering a silent message to his mother across the ocean, "This is for you." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the entire hall erupted. People stood, clapping, crying, cheering his name. Simon Cowell wiped his eyes, visibly moved, something rare, something real. Then, without hesitation, he reached forward and slammed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti rained from above like blessings from heaven. Arvin fell to his knees, overwhelmed, tears streaming down his face. The noise around him faded as he looked up, hands trembling, eyes closed in gratitude. In that golden storm, the poor boy from Manila became something more, a voice the world would never forget. His song had not just won hearts, it had healed them. Somewhere far away, in a small hospital room, Maria watched from a flickering TV screen, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her son had made it. Her prayers had finally found their echo. When the golden confetti settled and the crowd's applause softened into silence, something deeper remained, a quiet truth about dreams, pain, and perseverance. Arvin had not just sung a song, he had reminded the world of something most had forgotten, that greatness often comes from the places where hope should not exist. He returned home weeks later, not as a celebrity, but as a son carrying light back to the one who had lit his path. Maria's health had improved, and when she saw him walk into that small hospital room, her tears said everything words could not. They didn't speak, they simply held each other, surrounded by the hum of life that now felt new. Fame didn't change Arvin. He still played his old guitar, still visited the same bridge, but now he sang for those who stood where he once stood, the unseen, the unheard, the forgotten dreamers who still believed in the impossible. Every note he sang was a message, you are more than your circumstances. His story spread beyond the stage, touching millions who saw their own struggles in his journey. Teachers played his performance in classrooms, mothers whispered his name to their children, and young singers across the world found courage in his voice. But for Arvin, the truest victory wasn't the golden buzzer, it was seeing his mother smile without worry for the first time in years. It was realizing that pain, when faced with love, could become something beautiful. His life became proof that sometimes, you don't need perfect conditions to shine, you only need a reason to keep going. And often, that reason is love. As the storyteller's voice fades, one question lingers in the heart of every listener. How many dreams die in silence because the world never stops to listen? Arvin's voice broke that silence, and in doing so, he taught us all that even the smallest song can echo across the world, if it is sung with truth. Because somewhere, under a bridge or in a crowded street, another voice is waiting, just like his once did, for someone to believe.